a computer virus that didn't just steal passwords or crash computers. It reached out of the digital world and physically destroyed nuclear equipment. Imagine lines of code spinning centrifuges until they shattered, all while operators stared at control panels showing everything was perfectly normal. No missiles, no bombs, just keystrokes and hidden logic. This was Stuxnet, the first cyber weapon in history. A worm so advanced redefined the rules of conflict for the first time. Nations realized that wars could be fought in silence, with no soldiers on the battlefield, only malware moving invisibly across the globe. What began as an attack on Iran's nuclear program would become a warning to every country, every critical system, and every person who depends on technology. Stuxnet wasn't just a virus. It was a turning point, a wake-up call that forever changed how the world thinks about security, technology, and even war itself. By the mid-2000s, Iran's nuclear ambitions had become one of the most pressing geopolitical concerns. At the Natanz facility, thousands of centrifuges were enriching uranium, a critical step not only for civilian energy, but also for potential nuclear weapons development. For the United States, Israel, and their allies, the prospect of Iran acquiring nuclear capability was seen as a direct threat to global security. Military strikes were an option, but they came with enormous risks: retaliation across the Middle East, economic instability, and possible escalation into full-scale war. What was needed was a way to show Iran's nuclear progress without triggering open conflict. That's where cyber operations came in. Enter Stuxnet, a piece of malware unlike anything seen before. Traditional viruses stole data, erased files, or held systems hostage. But Stuxnet went after something far more dangerous: the machines themselves. It was designed with surgical precision to infiltrate industrial control systems, the very technology that ran Iran's centrifuges, and subtly sabotage them from within. When researchers finally uncovered Stuxnet in 2010, the shock was immediate. This wasn't the work of freelance hackers or profit-driven cybercriminals. Its complexity, its use of multiple zero-day exploits, and its laser-focused targeting revealed something unprecedented. The hand of nation-states with virtually unlimited resources, Stuxnet wasn't just malware, it was a weapon. Here's how events unfolded. Between 2005 and 2007, Iran's uranium enrichment program accelerated rapidly. Thousands of centrifuges were being installed at the Natanz nuclear facility, and intelligence agencies around the world grew increasingly alarmed. The fear was that Iran's civilian nuclear program might serve as cover for developing weapons-grade uranium. In response, sometime around 2008 or 2009, a covert operation was launched. Widely believed to be a joint effort between the United States National Security Agency and an Israelis Unit 8200. This operation was codenamed Olympic Games. Its mission was simple in theory, but extraordinary in execution: to sabotage Iran's nuclear program without triggering open war. By 2009, the weapon was ready. The Stuxnet worm was carefully crafted to infiltrate Natanz, a facility that was not connected to the internet, what's known as an air-gapped system. To get around this, attackers relied on one of the oldest and simplest tricks: the USB drive. At some point, whether through a contractor, engineer, or unwitting employee, infected USB sticks made their way into Natanz's internal network. From there, Stuxnet spread silently across Windows machines, searching for its intended target. In June of 2010, the first signs of this digital ghost were spotted. A small Belarusian cybersecurity firm called Virus Blockada discovered a strange new piece of malware on a client's computer. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, exploiting not one but multiple zero-day vulnerabilities in Microsoft Windows. That alone was highly unusual. 0 days are rare and extremely valuable. Whoever had created this worm wasn't an ordinary attacker. A month later, in July of 2010, researchers at Symantec began a deep dive into the malware. What they uncovered was stunning. Stuxnet wasn't random chaos. It was engineered with precision, programmed to interact with Simon's industrial control systems, specifically the Step 7 software that managed programmable logic controls, or PLCs. And more than that, it was designed to alter the behavior of centrifuge motors used in uranium enrichment. By late 2010, analysts were able to connect the dots. Iranian centrifuges at Natanz had been failing mysteriously. Operators noticed machines breaking down, spinning erratically, and tearing themselves apart, but the control systems showed no warning signs. Only then did it become clear. This was the result of Stuxnet's hidden hand. By 2011, the world understood what had happened. Stuxnet wasn't just another virus, it was the first precision-guided digital weapon. The opening shot in a new era of cyber warfare. Stuxnet wasn't just advanced, it was unprecedented. Here's how it worked from under the hood. First, it relied on a collection of zero-day exploits. 4 of them to be exact. That alone was extraordinary. 0 days are vulnerabilities unknown to software vendors, making them incredibly valuable. Most malware might use 1, maybe 2 at most, but Stuxnet chained together 4 separate flaws in Windows. Among them was the now infamous LNK vulnerability, which allowed the worm to execute automatically when a USB stick was simply viewed in Windows Explorer. Another flaw in the Win32k.sys driver allowed escalation to full system privileges, essentially giving Stuxnet complete control over infected machines. It also exploited vulnerabilities in Windows Remote Procedure Call, enabling it to spread silently across networks. The sheer number of 0 days made it clear. This was no ordinary attack. It carried the fingerprints of a nation-state with vast resources. Once inside, Stuxnet concealed itself with a rootkit, not on a desktop computer, but on industrial controllers. It embedded itself into Simon's WinCC and Step 7 software, the very tools engineers use to program and monitor PLCs. The worm intercepted communications between operators' workstations and the PLCs themselves. In other words, Stuxnet sat invisibly in the middle, altering commands on the way to the centrifuges while feeding back false, reassuring data to the engineers. Operators saw stable readings, calm dashboards, and no signs of trouble. Meanwhile, their centrifuges were slowly being pushed to the breaking point. The payload logic was brutally elegant. Stuxnet specifically targeted Simon's S7300 PLCs controlling frequency converter drives that regulated the speed of uranium enrichment centrifuges. It forced these centrifuges to spin well outside their safe ranges. At times, they were driven up to 1410 Hz, far beyond what their rotors were designed to handle. At other times, Stuxnet slowed them almost to a crawl, dropping them down to just 2 Hz. This constant cycling, speeding up, slowing down over and over again, placed enormous physical stress on the delicate machinery. Eventually, the rotors cracked, warped, or shattered altogether. And through it all, operators saw nothing unusual because Stuxnet ensured their monitoring systems displayed normal, stable values. The worm didn't spread blindly either. It was selective. Stuxnet propagated laterally across Windows networks, even using stolen digital certificates from companies like Realtek and J-Micron to appear legitimate. But the destructive payload only triggered if the exact Natanz configuration was detected. If the worm didn't find that environment, it remained dormant. That level of precision was unheard of. This wasn't cybercrime. It wasn't about money or disruption for its own sake. This was a sniper rifle in code form, designed to hit one target and one target only. The results were devastating. Analysts estimate that Stuxnet destroyed around 1,000 centrifuges at Natanz, effectively delaying Iran's nuclear program by 1 to 2 years. At first, Iranian operators had no idea what was happening. They trusted the clean, stable data displayed on their screens, unaware that their machines were spinning out of control, vibrating violently, and breaking down in front of them. To those inside the facility, it looked like an unexplainable wave of mechanical failures. But once Stuxnet was uncovered, the shockwaves were global. Security researchers realized that this was more than a targeted strike against one nuclear plant. The implications went much further. If malware could stealthily destroy uranium centrifuges, what would stop a similar attack from targeting power grids, water treatment plants, oil pipelines, or hospitals? Suddenly, every piece of industrial infrastructure, from factories to utilities, looked vulnerable. Semantic researcher Liam Omerchu, one of the first to analyze the code, summed it up bluntly. This is not some hacker sitting in a basement. This is a government agency developing an advanced attack. And that was the moment the world understood. Cyber warfare had crossed a threshold. Stuxnet had become the proof of concept, the undeniable demonstration that malicious code could be weaponized, with surgical precision, capable of creating real-world destruction. For Iran, the fallout was both technical and political. Their nuclear ambitions were temporarily slowed, but their security apparatus was humiliated. For the rest of the world, Stuxnet represented something even bigger, the dawn of state-sponsored digital weapons, and a warning that the battlefield had expanded into cyberspace. So what do we really learn from Stuxnet? The first lesson is that being disconnected from the internet doesn't guarantee safety. The Natanz facility was air-gapped, isolated from outside networks, and yet a simple USB stick became the bridge that carried the worm inside. It's proof that even the strongest barriers can be bypassed if an attacker is determined enough. The second lesson is the sheer power of zero-day vulnerabilities. These are flaws unknown to the software vendor, and in Stuxnet's case, 4 of them were used at once. That level of sophistication was unprecedented, and it showed how dangerous it can be when governments stockpile these vulnerabilities instead of disclosing and patching them. Holding on to secret exploits can create global risks when, not if, they leak or are reused. The third lesson is about industrial control systems themselves. These systems, known as ICS or SCADA, run factories, power plants, water treatment facilities, and pipelines. Yet many of them were designed decades ago with little to no security in mind. Stuxnet exposed just how fragile they are. Complex machinery driven by outdated code, often with minimal defenses. Finally, Stuxnet highlighted the importance of supply chains and digital trust. The worm used stolen certificates from legitimate companies like Realtek and J-Micron, which allowed it to masquerade as trusted software. This attack proved that digital certificates, which are supposed to guarantee authenticity, can themselves be weaponized. For businesses, the takeaways are clear. Patch aggressively, segment networks, and use anomaly detection tools that can spot unusual behavior in industrial systems. For individuals, the lessons are just as relevant. Avoid using untrusted USB devices. And remember that cybersecurity isn't limited to protecting files or passwords. It has a physical dimension too. Because when digital systems fail, the real world suffers the consequences. Stuxnet was the first cyber weapon, but it wasn't the last. In 2015, Ukraine's power grid was knocked offline by a piece of malware known as black energy. For the first time, hundreds of thousands of civilians sat in the dark, not because of bombs or storms, but because of a keyboard and malicious code. It was a chilling demonstration that entire nations could be disrupted at scale. In 2017, the WannaCry ransomware outbreak crippled hospitals across the United Kingdom. Emergency rooms turned patients away, surgeries were canceled, and lives were put at risk, all because of a rapidly spreading worm exploiting unpatched Windows systems. What Stuxnet began as a covert military tool had now echoed into global cybercrime. And in 2021, the Colonial Pipeline attack disrupted fuel supplies across the eastern United States, causing panic buying, gas shortages, and chaos at the pump. It proved once again that cyber attacks don't just affect data or networks, they ripple into the economy, infrastructure, and daily life. Taken together, these events trace a direct line back to Stuxnet. The worm opened Pandora's box, showing the world that software could cause physical disruption. Since then, cyber warfare has become a new battlefield. Today, researchers warn that the next generation of attacks may be even more devastating, powered not just by human-crafted malware, but by AI capable of adapting in real time, striking faster, spreading further, and hiding deeper than ever before. The uncomfortable truth is that cyber weapons are no longer rare. They are tools of statecraft, espionage, and even terrorism. And as the technology advances, the question is no longer what they'll be used again, but when and against whom. Stuxnet wasn't just a worm. It was a warning shot, a demonstration that code alone could destroy machines, cripple infrastructure, and shake entire societies. And once that door was opened, it could never truly be closed. The world had entered a new era, one where digital weapons carry consequences just as serious as bombs or bullets. So I'll leave you with a question. Was Stuxnet a necessary strike to prevent nuclear escalation, or did it set a dangerous precedent by normalizing cyber warfare? Was it a bold act of defense, or the opening of Pandora's box? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments. If you found this breakdown valuable, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share it with others who care about the hidden stories of cybersecurity. On this channel, we'll keep uncovering the history of cyber weapons, espionage, and digital warfare. The conflicts you don't see on the evening news, but which shape our world every day. Thanks for watching, and remember, awareness is the first defense. Stay safe out there.